So I have the pleasure of sitting here with the Roger Black, which I cannot tell you how wonderful it is to see you, Roger. It's been a long
Likewise,
time,
David.
and I feel like I should wear a jacket. I should be wearing a jacket and a tie. You look fabulous. You look
Well, this is a presentation. I figured I'm on stage, and in the last year, how many times did you put a necktie on?
that's
In,
that.
in my case, this is number two.
I don't think I've worn a tie. Yeah, I did once. I did once. It's true. I did. But it's been rare. Yeah, for sure. You look great. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks.
And you are dialing in, as it were. Remember dialing in? You're dialing in from St. Petersburg, Florida. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
St. Pete Beach. Yes.
St. Pete Beach. And listen, just quick background on Roger for those of you who don't know his work. He has been a designer for 50 years
Yeah.
and going all the way back. I mean, you were there at the Rolling Stone magazine in the 70s at critical times when it was really blossoming. New York Times magazine, Newsweek magazine. Just really quick, you launched Fast Company magazine, right? And Smart Money. You redesigned the San Francisco Examiner. You moved on to web. You did MSNBC and Discovery Channel. You've done so many different major projects over all these years, and it's an incredible, beautiful work. I've always loved looking at your stuff.
Thank you.
And with type, of course, through all of this, you have been in the middle of the type revolution, the digital type revolution, moving from the old letter set and all the good old
Yeah.
days to
Well,
digital,
metal to phototype to
from
digital.
metal to photo, and then to digital. And while most of us were, just putzing around with Photographer or something, you were launching Font Bureau. I mean, you have been really right there from the very beginning in digital type. And here we are,
Thank you.
2021, and you're still doing amazing work.
Well, I'm still working. Let's put it that way.
No, amazing work, and we'll get to that. Really important work, and so we will get to that later. So welcome, Roger. Thank you for being here. I
Thanks,
really
David.
appreciate it.
Nice to be here. I've always liked the Creative Pro thing.
Well, it is. You've done so many different projects. I do have to ask one crazy thing about. I actually got my start in design because my stepmom, when I was a little kid, but when you were on the front lines, I was a little kid and I was designing album covers with my stepmom. My stepmom was a graphic designer, and she and I connected actually through designing album covers. She would like be, I was a little kid. She was like, "Hey, let's design an album cover. Just pick something." Have you ever done an album cover? I remember that was like the epitome of design to me.
No, I would say nothing big, nothing commercial. The
Oh, okay.
My favorite thing that I did that's in music was there's a kind of folk singer, Texas rockabilly singer named Don Sanders, in Austin and Houston back in the 70s. And when he put out his first record, which was vinyl,
Yeah.
he wanted me to do a jacket, and I thought, it was just a single, really, and or an EP, and I thought, nobody cares about the jackets. They just want. So I did a label, and I think maybe I could find that and send it to you. But I was fascinated with the label going around,
Yeah.
and so have you ever heard of the Altergraph? The
No.
the Altergraph was a kind of a slot camera, slot screen, or however you call it, thing, where you would move the film behind and have the image going one way and the other, and you had these templates, and you could like curve type, or what I like is you could bow it all the way around in a circle,
Yeah.
and then it'll go around in the circle. You could, of course, there's, this is the 70s, or maybe this could even been the 60s. It was a long time ago. And that was my favorite thing. And I still have it someplace, but that was it. There are so many people like I worked with or later who were, polisher or, my boss at Rolling Stone when I first got there, Tony Lane, and his predecessor, Michael Salisbury. And then people that I hired at Rolling Stone or came after me, Chris Ostapchuk, who's still at Sony,
Wow.
which used to be CBS, Columbia Records. And yeah, that's the most, he's probably the longest running record art director.
It's fascinating to me that you talk about taking type and bending it like that in these crazy ways. Now, yes, it was the 60s or the 70s, but a lot of people who've been involved with type would freak out by that. They're like, no, type is pure and it was designed a certain way. Don't mess with it. Do you feel that way still? I mean, are you willing to
I
bend the
don't
heck
feel
out
that
of
way
type?
at all. Well, I think that there are certain kinds of places, like if you're trying to do a particular revival or something, you want it to be as authentic as you can.
Okay.
Or if you're trying to work within a particular spirit, sure. But one of the things that's happened with type is, really since we went off of letterpress, that kind of really tactile bang of the type and splatter of the ink has gone away, and everything is really sorry.
Real life is
Well, real life,
entering.
yeah.
It's persistent that way.
I hit the wrong button.
That's okay.
Anyway, so yeah, let's put this on do not disturb. We can do that. Anyway, so the thought is that that kind of 3D feeling of type, the bend of it, or the ink spread,
Hmm.
or the just kind of dust and scratchiness that used to get, everything got so clean and straight and sharp,
Hmm.
that I tried. I mean, I like to play with it. Why not? And why shouldn't you? Nothing is. I mean, it's just type. As long as you can read it. I mean, that's sort of my main principles. Like, it should still be readable. But like this thing in back of me, it's not a picture. It is from the Type Network site, the brochure on Forma. That
I I thought that was a picture. That's a
this
screen.
Yeah, this is actually just off my phone.
Oh, I love it.
You
Okay.
gotta love that, right? Well,
Absolutely.
I couldn't figure out it because I've got two screens going, and I don't know how to get a third screen going. I have to look that up. But anyway, see, this is the brochure on Type Network about Forma. So if you Google Forma Type Network, you'll get this.
Okay.
And Forma is an Aldo Novarese typeface that I wanted to use for the Asian Tatler magazines, that kind of style magazine in Hong Kong, with editions all over Asia. And so I got David Jonathan Ross to revive this.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that's interesting about it, and looking at the original drawings, like, so this is showing all the sizes. And looking at the original drawings, we found that, and here's Aldo. This is one of my favorite little brochures we did. Aldo is just, and that's the type turned sideways. Now, take a look at the edges here. That's curved.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, that is not the design. That's me. That is me looking at the stereotypes in the printing of the brochures that they did, the specimens that Nebbiolo did, and they were, because of just the way stereotypes work, mats or stereotypes, the corners were rounded, and so this is way blown up. You don't notice it. And the other aspect here is that it looks like there's a taper in the edge.
I was going to say that. It is fascinating. It's a little bit hard to tell from this angle, but
look, even worse
there
at
is
that
a
angle.
sense of, I mean, the idea that type would look one way visually at distance, but then when you really look at it, there's a lot of different tricks going on to give it that feel.
Well, the idea here is that we are going to, that DJR, David Jonathan Ross, put those curves back in, and we were able. I saw the tapers in the drawing, and I saw these rounded edges in the artifact, and he of course an axis, because this is all variable now, and
Oh
he made
wow.
an axis for the rounded corners, so I could make it a really rounded type if I wanted to, and he made an axis for the tapers, and it could look like Optima. But
Wow.
he, it's at the big sizes you barely notice it, and he kept the curve. So if you use the optical sizes, it's basically not noticeable. But to me, it makes it a little warmer, and it's an
Hmm.
artifact of
Hmm.
letterpress. I mean, it's a consequence of letterpress that I really liked, and I kind of miss. So
That sense of
that's Forma. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So this is tell us a little bit about Type Network because I think a lot of people in the audience may not know about what you're doing there.
Okay. Type Network is primarily a distributor for some of the top type foundries in the world. And it was an offshoot of Font Bureau, which is the foundry that I helped start in 1989. It's actually a spin-off of my design studio. And David Berlow, who was at Bitstream, came and ran it.
Mm.
And I actually did as little possible work on it as I could. Uh, but I commissioned a lot of fonts. And there's another thing at you can see at typenetwork.com, which is called Roger Black Collection, which is a bunch of fonts, revivals and custom fonts like this one. Forma is in there,
Okay.
that I've done over the years. And Font Bureau made that possible. But eventually, time passed, and we weren't going to keep doing this forever. And we started thinking, what about all these? What about all the designers that have come out of the foundry? People like Tobias Fairjones or Cyrus Highsmith, David Jonathan Ross, and there are many others. Victoria Rushton, and a bunch, a bunch of people. Richard Lipton, who David Berlow kind of amazingly generously said, let's give them their own foundries, and we'll make a group, and we'll continue to distribute and help them do production. But it's let them take over their lives. And
Wow.
that's what Type Network is. So then we thought, well, let's ask other people if they want to join in, because once we built this thing, anybody, other good type designers might want to take. Well, they did. So some wonderful people like Peter Van Blockland came in. Well, and old friends like Neville Brody and of course Matthew Carter and Cohn. And but then we started getting all these amazingly electric designers come in that I didn't really had never worked with, but it contacted us. And through Type Network, one that comes to mind is Ramiro Espinosa from
Hmm.
Retype, who's actually in Holland. I think he's
Oh,
from
interesting.
Spain originally.
Okay.
Another Latin is Rodrigo Zaini from Plow in Rio.
Wow.
Fantastic foundry and designer.
And you're bringing all of these folks together into under one
Yeah,
umbrella, the
they're
Type
over
Network.
30. There's over 30, and many more coming in this year. But they're all really good. There's not just like a random collection.
It seems like
Everybody, yeah,
it seems like another thing you're doing with Type Network is also education. I mean, you've
well, we're
always been
trying.
interested. Well, we've always it's hard. You've always been very interested in educating the public. I mean, you've written books. Of course, you've been speaking for years. You're here, and also Type Magazine. Actually, I don't. I should know this, but is Type Magazine out of the network as well, or is that a
No,
separate
although
thing?
that's a very interesting question. Type Magazine's sort of been on hiatus.
Yeah.
With very difficult to get people to give us a lot of money to publish it. I hate that, but it's everything's coming back now, and there's a new plan for a big Type Magazine this year, and Type
Great.
Network is very, very much, very much part of it. And
It
I
okay.
say that because I'm now chairman of Type Network, and it's my, I own the majority of the company. So hell, I can do whatever I want, right? so
That's a good
so
feeling. I like
so
that.
let's sponsor Type Magazine.
It's good to be king, as they say.
Well, I mean, it's a Type Network is still a very small company. We
Mm.
have a, there's a lot of energy, and I think there's going to be some big things coming this year. A lot of changes coming, more, and the content thing that you mentioned. I think we're going to be able to do a lot more within
Great.
both what we do and events and sponsorships and stuff. So, yeah.
Great. Well, I think I really I love Type magazine. I know it has been on hiatus for a little while, but I love that feeling of it's not just here we're going to distribute the fonts, but there's a sense of we want you to understand what you're working with here. I mean, fonts. It feels to me like fonts really have three different things that they do. I mean, they're of course, as you said, they have to be readable. There's a sense of transmitting text, but there's also an art to them themselves. I mean, the feel of a font is a whole separate thing. And then there's the typography, the way that you're putting them all together on a page. You're designing a page, and it feels like you've been involved with all three of those aspects for decades now. You have been involved with the font side of it, the art of it, of what does this thing feel like, making it readable, but also that typography, building pages, and you've been building pages through magazines, through newspapers, websites. Okay, not album covers. I feel bad about that now. But
Nobody ever, yeah. After a while, you'd think they'd ask you. I've done very few book jackets too. I can count them on one hand, probably, of anything. I mean, I've done some design books and stuff, but not very many. Every now and then somebody says, could you help me? But there are whole people who do fantastic work in this area, and
it's a different
never
world.
done anything.
Actually, why don't you share your screen? Let's look at some of your work as well here. Some of your portfolio.
Some of the ancient stuff.
Well, let's look at some of the ancient stuff and then move forward. We can move forward quickly to. But
okay.
I think this stuff is just.
So this is a portfolio. I never did a portfolio. I never had a portfolio. I had one. I take it back in 1971 when I was trying to get my first job that I didn't invent for myself.
Okay.
That was I still have that. Oh, and so I may put this together. This is like 10 years ago. So it's not exactly up to date. But here's Rolling Stone. And then here are a couple of spreads. And what we did at Rolling Stone was I became art director in 76. And I had the idea that each story should have its own typeface. So this is kind of an education in typography for me.
Wow.
And then we started doing our own, and this is pretty grungy, but I know by the time it's on Zoom, everything's a little.
That's true. Yes, that's okay.
Everything's a little ragged, but so we did a redesign and a typeface that Jim Parkinson in San Francisco did for us. And after some research of what is the font, so here you can see perpetual italic used with it, and then we also used a lot of the monotype Cochin. Anyway, so that's Rolling Stone. On the left, you see the old logo, and then on the right, the logo that I put on, which was then later changed. They wanted it a little swankier.
Huh.
And these are you can see the Ali cover and the Patti Smith cover, very much kind of my spirit from that time.
Yes.
And this is, we're talking about 1977, 78. So it was a while back. The interesting thing about the typeface of Rolling Stone, which is, a Jensonian, is that it's still there. It's still used. The next one I did was New West magazine, which was the sister of New York magazine. I ended up doing both. And I said, well, I've done a lot of photography. Let's do illustration. So this on the left is the only time I've ever put a person dying on the cover. You wouldn't think that would be very good for the newsstand.
Yeah, usually that's avoided.
But it did really well. This was the Jim Jones thing. Actually, Mike Salisbury came in as a consultant, and he got this idea for the Lakes cover, which was set in metal, Kennerly, a Gaudi typeface. And then we sent it off. We pasted it up and sent it off to one of his retouchers, and they did this kind of ruche looking, water painting on top.
Wow.
So then, this is all New West, showing different. So here's a whole kind of William Morris thing, although William Morris never would have had a colored border.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the typeface California that I later got Font Bureau to revive.
Mm.
And yeah, that's New West. And it's kind of, it was fun. It was a very short period of time where it was this great magazine. John Carroll was the editor, famous columnist later. But you can see the kind of thing that I was trying to do, like this on the edge cover by, cutting into the border. We had a lot of things that were given that the logo was not mine. And on the far right was Goodbye to the 70s, was kind of a Paul Davis homage, because he had this cat sitting on the beach. And I don't remember yeah, there was what's his name? Chu did the illustration, and he was really an art center student. And he, I said, yeah, but we got to make it more 70s. So could you give him aviator glasses? And the cat, and we want a cat waving goodbye to the 70s. And he said, so he didn't understand. He thought like an aviator helmet. Right. And it came back, it was done. We didn't have time to change it. And everyone loved it. And weirdly, I was working for the owner. The owner was Rupert Murdoch. And I was in New York, and I met him on the elevator at the old New York Post building. And he says, oh, hey, Roger. So it says in his Australian accent, which I can't do. He says, what's on the cover of New West this week? Of course, it was not a weekly, it was a bi-weekly. I said, oh, great, Rupert. We have a cat waving goodbye to the 70s. And he said, he looked at me without any hesitation, and said, won't sell a copy. And it actually was the best-selling copy that year.
Excellent. Excellent.
Then after freelancing for a while, and I did Martha Stewart's first book. That was kind of fun. But I went to the New York Times and did the magazine. And it was a similar kind of thing, trying to use a bunch of typefaces. Mm-hmm. These are just some covers. It was fun. We did this alone cover, and Bert Silverstein painted it, and everyone thought, oh, I wish I could be alone like that.
Oh my gosh.
The kind of poignancy didn't come out.
Wow.
So there's a bunch of illustrations, Grashow, and then Quezada on the far right.
I always love the way you're bringing all these different, we're not seeing this much here, this is getting a little bit more traditional, but the way you're bringing all the different faces together. I loved what you were saying about Rolling Stone, where each article has its own face, and that kind of went away for a while, and I feel like it's coming back now.
Maybe, yeah. Well, everything wanted to be, I mean, you have to remember, there are a lot of different magazines, and so it becomes clutter if you don't watch out. So I think it was a kind of branding decision that people said, oh, let's try to let's try to get a little more, consistency, so that it's the magazine. But that got a little boring too.
Yes.
And I think that people, you can do both.
You want to find that balance.
Yeah. So where were we? Then I went to Newsweek after the Times. I actually was, for a short time, the art director of the whole New York Times. But Newsweek paid me a lot more money for a lot less work.
So that was easy.
So I put that I did that banner logo. This look at Newsweek lasted about 15 years. So some of the images on that's kind of a spectrum of way before me from. If you heard of the Aga, the famous art director, Dr. Aga, Agha, famous art director from the 50s, did that, what was called the coat hanger around, and he put that type that became the slab type that was adapted.
Gotcha.
So here are some of the covers from not just my era, but after me. And it stayed pretty consistent. And it's a phrase that I use, it's design equity. Font Bureau put in the Scotch Roman, which was a type for a while.
Yeah.
And there's Patricia Bradbury and a number of art directors did wonderful work on here.
I love that idea of design equity. I just for pause on for a moment, this concept that you're investing this time and energy, the fonts, the design, all of this is going into this, where there's a sense of equity that's lasting for that people, like you said, people recognize it. I guess I haven't heard that phrase before, so I was just enjoying that.
Yeah, well, this is a look that lasted 15 years. In the modern era, that's really a long run.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, the New Yorker cover is what, 1925. What year are we up to now?
Right.
That's getting
Right.
toward 100 years.
Wow.
Now that's real design equity. Now, the thought that everything has to change with every art director and all move around is very internalized. I mean, I felt like, if you think that you're selling to the readers are your customers, even if they're not paying a damn thing. Although the model today is subscriptions, and the New York Times, the readers are, there are the real owners of the New York Times, because they're putting all the money up to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do something that makes it easier for them, so that they don't have to keep figuring out what the user interface of the app or whatever.
Yeah.
Lou Silverstein, my boss at the New York Times, a wonderful, famous art director, said, changing things like that is like going into somebody's living room and moving the furniture without telling them. They get up in the middle of the night, they go to the bathroom, and they trip over the couch.
I that is so true. And of course,
Yeah.
in these days of apps, you have apps and websites and even a little bit of print left over. Things are changing so rapidly that it is
we don't ask their
difficult.
permission.
We don't ask their permission. I like that idea. And
So the thought is, you gotta work with that. If something could last a little bit longer, you think about it. In the old days, I read Newsweek because my mother and father got Newsweek.
Right.
And
yes.
There's a generational thing there that happens. Is where did you grow up with? And that could be apps today, but it's still very disconcerting when everything just kind of morphs and it's everything gone. I think that you want variety, you want change, but you also want some kind of sense of familiarity and a complicity with the reader. I mean, it's not right to just turn it around all the time. Anyway, so to finish my story, I did Smart after Newsweek. So I became essentially a freelancer, and that was where we started. Not necessarily doing custom. I mean, Newsweek had a custom font, but Smart Magazine. We just adapt. Well, that's not true. We did. We used the Font Bureau did this one font for us. So yeah, it had a custom font. And here's a look. This was a very short-lived kind of Esquire wannabe, and it was really fun. It was Terry McDonald was the editor. Rhonda Rubenstein became the art director after me, and she's fantastic. And then we all went to Hearst, but then that became my big client. But this was Smart in a very short period of time in the late, 89, 90.
Wow.
Then Esquire, and then I did all the Hearst magazines. So here we were adapting, old typefaces like Bureau Grotesque, which was Grotesque number 9 from Stevenson Blake, and that that we got digitized and put in the magazine. So this was right at the time when everything was going to desktop.
Yes.
And it's interesting. They didn't use. We were using Quark Express in those days, but before that, my first desktop publication was actually Ventura Publisher.
Oh my gosh!
Which was the Banana Republic magazine, Trips.
Wow!
And we used the Mac for font downloads to the printers.
Wow.
That was all a PC, and I'm back to using PCs again. Anyway, Esquire. That's Rhonda's covers on the right. So this is, celebrities. Try to add a little sex appeal, have fun with it. So this is early 90s. And then everything started morphing. 95, the web started. And I kept complaining about, you can't read this shit. And one of the Microsoft called me and said, the New York Times wants to use this product we're working on called The Reader. which was actually responsive,
Oh yes, I
Windows
remember this
design.
early. Yes.
Yeah. So we did this. I'm trying to remember what the date was. It's 2000, 2005, 2006.
Okay.
But it was responsive on, this is, there was the web out there, and it was delivered. It could be the data came on the web, but it was a Windows app.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys there, Philippe Fortes, so you can see, it would work on very small sizes. And they were trying to do Windows Phone at that era.
Mm.
uh,
Yeah, it's
and
hard for some people to remember that there was a time when responsive was a totally new
was it
concept.
was it
15 years
yeah
ago, it was
was a
like, wait a
breakthrough.
minute, you could change things? That doesn't make sense. Took a
So
while to wrap our heads around that.
so now we're up to 2011, and I did this with Philippe Fortes, a great designer, developer, who was on the Microsoft team for the New York Times. And I said to him, "Could you do this? Could we do this in HTML?
Hmm.
Could we make a web app?" And he said, "Well, I could." And so he did. And so we did. One of the biggest projects was Nomad Editions, which are a lot of different magazines. And this was completely responsive, worked on mobile, worked on different, tablets. And so this is, 10 years ago, kind of hard to imagine.
It was early. Yeah, this was really hard to
And
do.
no one knew what the word responsive was.
Yeah.
And Philippe's, it was a JavaScript framework called TreeSaver that this all ran on.
I didn't know that.
And
Interesting.
there were a bunch of different publications, and it was I thought, great. I loved it. But there was never,
there was also this thing around the iPad coming out. You're showing the iPad here.
yeah.
In 2010, the iPad comes out, and there's this sense of, oh my gosh, this is the future. We've got tablets. Everyone's going to have a tablet. Everyone's going to carry a tablet everywhere, and every magazine's going to go to tablet. The print magazine world got very nervous. Like, okay, print is obviously going to go away now because everyone's going to have a tablet, and that didn't entirely come
Well,
to
what
pass.
happened? I mean, in both in the case of print, magazines and newspapers, and in the case of these kinds of things, one of my favorite interviews from that era, somebody said, "Well, what about the iPad? Is it going to save everybody?" And I said, "We can't look at the iPad as a magic pony." and, and the thing is that many publishers thought it was going to save them.
Yeah.
But the problem with that idea is that there's nothing wrong with the iPad in terms of a delivery mechanism. I mean, I was happy in TreeSaver using the iPad browser, just making it a web app. We didn't have to do an app for every little thing,
Right, right.
So
that was the mistake, I think, early on, where everyone figured we have to have an app. Let's
but
become software developers.
Yeah, here's another TreeSaver customer, the Sporting News, which it was fun. It worked fine. The problem is, what is the business model for your publication? If advertising, they all thought advertising was going to come in.
Right.
And advertising came in, but it went into Google
Yeah.
and to Facebook.
Yeah.
And now it's
centralized.
The percentage of Google that Google has of digital advertising? It's over half.
Yeah.
And so that was the problem. And I don't think it was a design problem. I don't think it was a technology problem. I think it was, Google is listening to me. Did you hear that?
They were trying to talk to you.
You can't stop Google. Yeah, I say Google and she comes along.
That's hysterical.
That was great. Yeah, she resents. This is a very quick. Anyway, so I think that's been the problems. This is one of the last print projects I did. I did some covers, did a cover system for Harper's that was quite fun. But this is 100 years ago. Now, I was going to take you. Let's get rid of this.
There we go. Okay, now I see you.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. How about that?
I'll show you one more thing. And
yes, I'm so curious. So this is moving up to present day here, right?
A year ago.
Okay, that's close enough.
Yeah, this is a book called Defiance, which was published in Hong Kong.
Wow.
And it's a kind of TikTok of the whole protest movement. And it's
Interesting.
a big thumping book that was printed by a printer called Paramount. The owner of that printing house, who is also the owner of the Apple Daily newspaper, is in jail.
Oh, wow.
Just to show you what happened to Hong Kong. Okay,
Yeah.
so this type is an actual. It's called what is it called? HK Freedom, the top type,
Okay.
by Julius Huey, former monotype designer, fantastic designer. And then that's Tiling Gothic from Font Bureau. So the fun
Beautiful.
thing was to do this in Chinese. And let me see if I can share screen again.
Yeah, it's
Actually,
fascinating. You haven't talked about this, but it's fascinating that you have done a lot of overseas work as well. I mean, you've spent a lot of time in Hong Kong,
yeah.
and it's interesting to me that you have worked in these various languages and tried to make them all fit together. Uh,
Well, it's a cultural problem. I mean, if you let's see if I can.
I'm seeing InDesign here.
Yeah. So I show this because some of your folks are InDesign
Yes,
junkies.
it makes me happy to see it.
And let's see.
I'm in home. I'm in home again.
But what's interesting, let's see if I can zoom in on the type. So we did English and I'm not doing this very well. We did English and China. Here we go. Okay,
There you go.
so here you get to see it side by side,
Yep.
and notice it's on a grid. I always leave it when I'm doing layouts. I always leave the grids on so I can see what the hell's going on.
Hmm.
And it's so easy to turn it off. I mean, I don't understand why some people just keep turning it when you can hit just preview and then you're fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a monotype face here. That's not. It's called Ying He from Monotype because Julius only did the big fonts. And I just said, okay, for Chinese, I don't speak Chinese. I just said, well, I'm going to do it like a lot of art directors and just look at the type as patterns.
Okay.
It's a gray box. Forget about it.
Okay.
Because I was very reluctant to design in a language I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But you're
but I
looking
bet
at the feel. You're looking at the feel of the type, the
yeah,
feel of the space.
and I think you can get away with it. It's much better if you know the language.
Well, you were
Uh,
also working with people who knew the language, so there's probably
correct,
some back and
correct.
forth there.
And now, of
Yeah.
course, Google will translate everything for you in seconds.
Not always well, but it'll
No,
translate.
no, don't write a love letter to somebody who speaks a foreign language
Seriously.
in Google Translate. But for business, it's good. So you can see what we did was we had to do bilingual captions and trying to balance that. And I was trying to use. I mean, this color on the screen is not right, but there's a kind of warm gray that I
Mm-hmm.
used to kind of calm it down a little bit. And that, you know, in the Latin languages, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, I can fake it, even French. I can't say much, but I can read it.
Yeah.
And so I was working in Europe and Latin America with no problem. Then I think the first Asian country I went to was Singapore, and they has a lot of English there. But then Indonesia, forget about it. But it's Latin,
Okay. Okay. So
and
you can still.
yeah, so it's Latin fonts like Vietnam. Yeah, Malaysia, Indonesia, some of the biggest countries in Southeast Asia use Latin fonts,
Gotcha.
but not Latin languages. And so I couldn't read them. I have no idea what they say. But I'm a little embarrassed about the Chinese, but I got away with it.
It's
Because
one
people are
of the things
looking
I
at the
love about
pictures.
this though is that you're in InDesign. You are actually a designer who uses InDesign. You use the tools as well as I mean, there's a lot of designers out there who design and then they hand it off, but you've always gotten your hands messy, your hands dirty, right? I mean, you're
Well, I
actually in
want to
there
do
doing
it.
it.
Yeah, I'm sorry these photos aren't linked anymore, but you get the idea.
Totally.
Yeah, I
Oh, it's
mean,
great.
I always tell the story. I went to Cork, hired me or paid for my way to go to the Aspen Design Conference.
Hmm.
And we're talking about 1991, 1990, in that time frame.
Yeah, really early.
And so I got this big Super Mac set up, and in the lobby, I gave a presentation, but then I went out. I said, "I'll show people in the lobby if you want to come." So I went out to the lobby before lunch, and I was just doing a few pages, and I felt these two presences behind me. You know how you do when someone's looking over your shoulder?
Yeah.
And I just about jumped out of my chair because I turned around on the left and it's Saul Bass. And I turn around on the right and it's Milton Glaser.
Awesome.
It's like,
oh my gosh,
Matthew and Paul. So I'm saying, yeah, what do you think? And Milton says, well, you don't do this yourself, do you, Roger?
Wow.
And that's the difference.
Yeah.
See,
it's a different time.
This is sort of I guess that we could turn this off. The difference is it's a major way that design has changed in the last 50 years. And I think it's completely changed now. I don't think there are very many people doing, Frank Gehry or some,
right.
Or the late Zaha Hadid, or those very conceptual architects who will do a sketch and then hand it to somebody to digitize. There's the famous story of Gehry wadding up a piece of tracing paper and throwing it on the desk and say, "Hey, use that for the scan that in."
Oh my gosh.
Later they'll have 3D printers and we'll be screwed. But I don't know if you've been in some of those buildings, but they're kind of hard to figure out where the door is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We've got a Gehry here.
Yeah, but they look great from a distance. And but what happened was when I started, it was the master doing the sketch and handing it off.
Mm-hmm.
And when desktop publishing came in, it really allowed people to do their own production. So you could design and get it done, get it set in type. So, I'd already started setting type in the 70s using, fairly crude devices by today's standards, but I was delighted. In 1973, we started a company called Type City, and all we had was a phototypepositor, which is a handset headline type machine.
Yep.
But that's been, I think, made it easier for me. So when HTML came out, how hard is it to figure? It's really great. If it's 1995, HTML is really easy for someone.
Right. That was right. Different time.
I could still do that kind of HTML.
Right.
But then it became more and more coding. And so I do hand off coding to people. I don't do that.
It is interesting how we've sort of come full circle. And now it's like, okay, we wanted to look, here's a prototype. We wanted to look like this. And you can get pretty close, but then you're handing it off to someone who's a technician.
Well, but there are a lot of people who are designer developers who they think design is the same. And I think that's a challenge. It's very hard. It's very hard to know how to do both or to do both well.
Mm-hmm.
I think, one of the questions we were talking about before we started was, what should people do? How do people get started in design? What are the best tricks of design? And my feeling is that you've got to know the history. I think if you're a developer primarily and you suddenly get interested in type and layout more, read the books, go back and there are now wonderful things, the archives like the Letterform archive.
Yes. Oh, so good.
That's got all this stuff. But there are quite a few great books on the history of type and printing that are really worth reading. I always say books and type by printing types by Updike.
Wow.
That's an amazing history that only takes you up to about 1800.
and you feel like that helps here in the digital era today.
Yeah, because the technology of type was three-dimensional letterpress printing. Mm-hmm. The reason why our type is the way it still is, the way the spacing works and all that, is because they're the guys starting 600 years ago who put calligraphy into machines.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a 500-year run they had. It's only been in the last 100 years that things started morphing into linotype and then all the rest. Now, that's the second thing I would say is kind of object lesson. my life, I mean, the amazing thing is that I'm still working and I'm trying to keep up with this tech, but the in my life, it never stopped. It never, we never, the technology just constantly kept changing.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think the thing for you to remember is if you're a new designer, is expect change.
Hmm.
It's not going to slow down.
It's not.
You know, you can get comfortable for about 6 months, and then it all morphs again.
How do
So,
you though? I mean, I found it's easier, and we're going to have to wrap this up because I have so many more questions, but we're going to have to wrap this up
cool.
to move on to see if we could add other questions from the audience. But um, how do you stay that flexible yourself? How do you stay that open to change? It does get harder for many of us as the each year goes by.
Well, I don't know. I'm always kind of self-critical that I haven't changed enough, that my stuff still. I mean, I like to have consistency, and and you want a style as a designer. You want to build a style that people can count on.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it really is annoying. Like for back in the '80s, people say, well, like you mentioned, Fast Company. Uh, Bill Weber from the Fast Company, he wanted the logo to look like Rolling Stone. I said, oh, please.
That's right. Been there, done that.
Yeah, I mean and I think it's really one of the most awkward logos I ever did, and they're still using. Well, they've changed it recently, but they keep changing it. But it
Yeah.
still looks, that little
It's
A is just,
yeah, it's still there. Yeah, I mean, the essence is there.
yeah. And but I think though you just have to be open. It's gonna change. Ride with it, have fun with it. It makes it less boring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is great. Listen, Roger, I so appreciate you taking the time to go through this. I'd love to connect you with the other people at Creative Pro Week, and we're gonna have some fun there. But this is a great history. Thank you.
Well,
Um,
thank you. I'm sorry
I'm
it took
really
so long to go through it, but it's always,
no,
you get me started.
no. I think this is brilliant, and we will follow up with more questions as well.
Okay,
I
cool.
can tell because there's a lot more that you have so much in that brain that we need to get out.
All
So,
right. Thank you,
all
David.
right. Thank you.